What's up, A to Z Sports Live? A little early, just before 8 o'clock today, because we have a ton of things to get to with a chaotic, fiery day at Titans practice on Tuesday, including our own Buck Reising going absolutely viral with Jeffery Simmons. So a ton of us to react to and a lot of different nuanced, layered topics to dive into. This is going to be an interesting show, and it's going to have to be a quick show because the Titans are back on the practice field at 8:30. So we wanted to start as early as possible today with the just before 8 a.m. start. So Jack and I will do and try to squeeze anything and everything about this conversation into about 25 minutes, which I think is going to be really difficult to do. I'll tell the backstory about what happened with Jeffery Simmons seeking out Buck Reising, as I put out there on Twitter that it's partially me that got to blame here for Jeff going to find Buck, but we'll have a great conversation overall, Jack. It's going to be fun. Jeff was mad. He was frustrated. He took it out on Buck, and there was also a lot of fighting in practice yesterday, so we'll detail all of that and how Jeff, in my opinion, crossed the line, and we'll talk about leadership as a whole too. So Jack, welcome in. Going to be a busy one. Let's get it going.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to breeze through this. You guys got to do your homework early. Help us out. If you're watching on Facebook, like the show. If you're watching on YouTube, also like the show. If you're watching on Facebook, share the show to at least one of your Titans Facebook groups, please. It helps us grow. It helps us reach new audience members. That's the goal for A to Z. It's a crazy training camp already. We want to bring everybody in here. So please like and share the show if you're watching on Facebook. Tap your notifications on. If you're watching on YouTube, turn that bell, tap that bell icon at the top of your screen, turn those suckers on. You do not want to miss an update. As you guys saw yesterday, it's hot and heavy every single day. Austin's on the ground over there today. Turn those notifications on if you're watching on YouTube. Finally, if you're watching on Twitch, text that Twitch link around to your Titans text groups. We want to bring everybody in here, whether you're watching from work, getting ready for work, getting ready to get off work. No matter where you are, text that Titans Twitch link around so we can bring in everybody, take the temperature of the Titans fan base. Austin, with all that said, big show ahead. Let's get it on the road.
Yep, let's do it officially. Welcome into A to Z Sports, powered as always by the BetMGM app. I'm Austin Stanley. He is Jack Gentry, the Tighten Up Podcast on the A to Z Sports Podcast Network. And we are Nashville's on-demand sports talk network, going live weekday mornings at 8 Central Time on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Links to the show segment by segment on our Twitter X timeline. Also hit us up on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more great Titans content. Got to thank our sponsors. They make it happen for us, and they help out all of you. Wilson County Hyundai, make them a part of your new car buying process. Go to see them in Lebanon or online at wilsoncountyhyundai.com. The Bone and Joint Institute, boneandjointtn.org, the region's destination for comprehensive orthopedic and sports medicine care, and Farm Bureau Health Plans. Get better with Farm Bureau Health Plans and get a quote today to save money and get better coverage, fbhp.com/ATOZ. So, tons to get to. This is going to be a interesting follow-up day to what was a crazy, fiery first day of pads Tuesday practice yesterday. I'm at St. Thomas Sports Park, Titans on the practice field in 28 minutes from now at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. So another short show here and a lot to get to. And I'm sure maybe, Jack, we won't have a chance to get to everything with this storyline, and we'll maybe have time to follow up tomorrow morning to see how Denard Wilson handles this, as coordinators will speak to Titans media today, and also how today transpires with other conversations that are guaranteed to follow. So I'll set the table here. The Titans' first day of pads yesterday. It was warm. It was super humid. Fans were on the sidelines to watch this training camp practice for the first time here. And when they got into 11-on-11, you saw immediately tempers start to flare. So early on in 11-on-11, Jeffery Simmons and J.C. Latham got into it, and it got to the point to where J.C. Latham, after a shoving match, for some reason, removed his helmet as Jeffery Simmons took a swing, a punch towards J.C. Latham after he removed his helmet. It didn't connect, luckily, but that was one big fight. So Brian Callahan, I think, then immediately had his first big training camp decision in this situation was, what do you do with a player that fights, and what happens when your best player swings at your first overall draft pick, rookie left tackle? And he kept Jeff in the practice. The very next snap, after a run play up the middle, a dog pile ensues, and this is not your outfield celebrating a pennant championship type of dog pile celebration. this was a dog pile that included a lot of money, a lot of cap space, and a lot of draft capital that was in this dog pile, including Jeff, Latham, Skoronski, because it was an offensive line, defensive line dog pile. Lloyd Cushenberry, who's got the highest paid center contract in NFL history this offseason, was at the very, very bottom of the pile. Arden Key was also in the pile too. So a lot of big money and high draft capital in that pile. And luckily, nobody got hurt. Brian Callahan then huddles up everybody immediately after that and settles everything down. And they continued to have a productive practice there on out. And I'll say this, the defense absolutely dominated the practice on Tuesday before and after all the fighting. And so then we have the story about Buck versus Jeff, because Buck tweets this out after the fight. Simmons just swung at Latham after some pushing and shoving. Refs who were at practice yesterday said Simmons would have been ejected from a game. He's back for the next two and immediately starts a brawl. Sloppy. Simmons needs to lock TF in. So that is the tweet that really began all of this. So, Jack, I first want to get your thoughts on the overall conversation about what happened with Simmons starting fights. I'm okay with training camp scuffles and training camp fights. What is your thought overall on this? There's more details and nuance to get into it before we go into what happened with Buck and Jeff after practice.
Yeah, Bill Callahan went on Ramon, Kayla, and Will yesterday morning and told those guys that, they're going to throw a couple fastballs at these players first day of padded practice. And it seems like it worked because, Big Jeff was ramped up out there. I don't have an issue with him swinging on Latham, really. I don't have an issue with him starting a fight. This happens at every single training camp. And Big Jeff is kind of your energy leader. He's the guy that these other players are going to look for to set the tone. Jeffery Simmons did that, and the left side of the offensive line seemed to have hold up their bargain as well, which is an encouraging sign to see, with Skoronski and Latham and Cushenberry all kind of frustrating the defensive line guys, at least for a few snaps. So I don't have an issue with what happened on the field at all, really. It doesn't bother me because Big Jeff, look, he's an emotional guy, but between the lines on Sundays, Big Jeff, outside of the spitting incident, has really been, not a guy that you have to worry about after the whistle. So look, none of this really bothers me with Big Jeff, but what happened off the practice field with Buck Reising raises a few concerns, but we'll get into that here in a second.
Sure. So I don't, as I said off the top, I don't have a problem with fighting in practice. I do think I do have a problem with Jeffery Simmons throwing a punch at JC Latham, because I think there are two things about this. One, throwing punches in football practice is one of the dumbest things you can do. And honestly, I don't know which is dumber, throwing a punch at a player wearing a helmet or throwing a punch at a teammate who is not wearing a helmet. Because
can I enter a third option? Taking your helmet off in the middle of a scuffle.
Yeah. Do not take yet. And look, rookie moment from JC Latham. He took his helmet off in a scuffle. That is also stupid. But still, like if you were having a fight in training camp practice, throwing a punch is a dumb thing in a training camp practice, one way or the other. You either have an opportunity for Jeffery Simmons to break his hand on a helmet, which hurts the football team, or you have a chance for JC Latham to get hit in the jaw by Jeffery Simmons without a helmet, and that could definitely change the trajectory of what JC Latham's ability to have a massive impact in this rookie season is. And let's be honest, guys, it got to the point yesterday where it was hard for Will Levis and other players on the offense to get anything done because the offensive line wasn't allowing things to get done. Reginald says, it's not dumb. You didn't play football. Reginald, you didn't go to English class. But I did play football. And look, you don't throw punches at helmets or at teammates. You can shove, you can fight, you can wrestle, you can take guys to the ground and scrap all you want. Punching is dumb as hell. And there's nothing about punching a helmet or a player not wearing a helmet that's going to have good come out of it. So I stand by that. I stand by that. Punching in training camp practice with your teammates is stupid one way or the other, helmet or no helmet, because there's a massive risk for injury on either side of that. And Major Key says punching is personal. I agree. You can get heated, and I think Jeffery Simmons is going out there and setting the tone all day long. I have no problem with Jeffery Simmons setting that tone. I think Brian Callahan, in my opinion, I think what should have made Jeff either go run laps or go to the sand pit or something for a short period of time to clear the air, because now there is a precedent set from Brian Callahan that if you fight in training camp, you're going to be back in there in the next snap. And I think that's a very interesting thing for Brian Callahan to do. So that's the first layer of this. It was a punch to a player in J.C. Latham and followed by an all-out brawl, and where, again, nothing bad happened, luckily, but there was a big center contract, a 7th overall draft pick, an 11th overall draft pick. Jeffery Simmons, one of the highest paid players on defense. Arden Key, this was before his suspension came out. There was a lot of money invested in that dog pile. That is not a good thing. And so they got away with it without any injuries, and they got away with it with just public embarrassment because of what happened next. So we're going to dive into what happened with Buck and with Jeffery Simmons, and I'll give you the backstory of how it worked. We also have an update from Paul Kaharski this morning on Buck and Jeff. But first, we got to tell everybody about our great training camp sponsor, and that is Smoky Mountain Tops. If you are looking for any new countertops in your kitchen or in your bathroom, Smoky Mountain Tops, they are the pros, and they've been family owned and operated for 30 plus years, and they have installed over 100,000 projects in both the Nashville and the Knoxville market. You've seen their work if you've been in Bridgestone Arena or Neyland Stadium recently. It is the best of the best, and Smoky Mountain Tops is proud to offer the luxurious hand-stone Opimio Quartz collection, as seen in both studios, Nashville and Knoxville. Handstone Quartz is known for quality and exceptional design, and has over 50 colors and unique patterns to draw your inspiration from. So call Smoky Mountain Tops to schedule an appointment. Their phone number is right there on that screen, or their website, SmokyMountainTops.com, and tell them that A to Z Sports sent you.
BetMGM.com, it's the king of sports books, and new users, if you're looking to download a new app, switch your sports books, get in the game in general, BetMGM is the place to do it. Download BetMGM to your phone, use our bonus code A to Z Sports, and you'll get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets when you sign up. The Olympics are going on. Great way to kind of kill some time, make a little pizza money. Team USA plays South Sudan in basketball today. Maybe a little something people are interested in. Download BetMGM, use our bonus code A to Z Sports, get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet misses.
All right, so we're going to go deeper into the Jeffery Simmons Buck Reising spat that absolutely went viral. If there's a definition of viral, it's what happened yesterday when TMZ, Fox News, the New York Post, and everybody else in the world picks it up. And again, based off of the tweet, Simmons just swung at Latham after some pushing and shoving, and Buck wraps up this tweet with sloppy, Simmons needs to lock TFN. For one, I don't think anything from that tweet from Buck was crossing the line or over the line at all. And so that is the reality of what practice was. And when you talk about a leader for this franchise that Jeffery Simmons is striving to be, and we'll talk about that here later on, he was the first guy to start fighting at training camp practice, and now it is national news overall because of what happened here. So after practice, Brian Callahan is doing his press conference. I'm standing on the fringe of that. I hear the locker room doors open behind me, and Jack, I hear where Buck at? And I look over my shoulder, and it's Jeffery Simmons, and he looks at me, and I do a Babe Ruth point and say, red tent over there. And so then Jeff just starts going, right? Jeff takes off with a purpose. And at first I didn't think anything about it because I didn't register it, because Buck has a player on radio after practice every day, right? So, and then I was like, wait a second. When Jeff was about 20 yards away from me, I said, there is no way in hell the Titans are going to give Jeffery Simmons to Buck after he starts all these fights. And so I'm like, I probably need to follow. So I walk over there, but by the time I got over there, it was already over. And Jeffery Simmons, the funniest thing I think in all this, Jeffery Simmons was signing autographs for like 8-year-old kids and just going about his business. And I walk over, and because Roger McCreary was over there, you had Titans media relations was there too. And I looked at them and I was like, asking was Jeff going on with Buck? And they both kind of like grinned and like, no. And I was like, okay, something happened. They explained what happened. And then we go back, and then I see the video that will play here of Jeffery Simmons confronting Buck Reising live on the sidelines with, I'll say this, setting the stage. You see where Buck was at with his table in the tent. It is about 20 feet off of the sideline, and there was about 3 rows deep of fans getting autographs right near where this went down. But here's the video, courtesy of 104.5 The Zone.
Well, Jeff, you want to sit down? We can talk whenever you want to talk. Jeff, we'll deal with that later. Roger McCreary sitting down with us here on 104.5 The Zone. Jeff, I mean, we're on the air right now. I'm right here, Jeff. We can talk anytime you want to. Unbelievable.
We got to make that happen.
Well, we'll deal with that later on. Roger McCreary sitting down with us here on 104.5 The Zone. Jeff, if you want to sit down and talk about this, we can talk about this. I'm talking to you right here. Jeff, we tried to talk to you last week. I'm being rude to Roger. We'll deal with you later. Roger, what's going on?
It's good. You're doing good out here. I'm doing good.
How was the day of practice? First padded practice.
Roger McCreary, ultimate pro, just rolling right into it. And then you saw one of my favorite parts is Lucas Panzica, as he texted me saying, smiling through the fear, was Lucas, and then said, oh, we got to make that happen. So, Jack, what was your initial reaction when you saw that video start to really gain steam? And there was a little bit of an edit out of there. Eric says, why did Taylor Lewan take a stray? I'll talk about that here in a second. But, Jack, I want to hear your thoughts overall of that interaction.
Yeah, I thought it kind of came off as unhinged from Jeffery Simmons. I mean, you talked about it earlier. You know, the guy swung at a rookie with his helmet off, started a fight like 2 plays later, and what the ref said would have gotten him ejected in a real football game. I don't know how Jeffery Simmons caught wind of Buck's tweet, which, I agree with you. There was nothing in there that crossed the line, in my opinion. I don't know how he saw his tweet so soon. Like, does he have his phone out there on the practice field? I'm not so sure. But look, it's a bad look for Big Jeff. I mean, you're talking about a media market that has been nothing but positive to Big Jeff in his entire career here. There's a lot of people that had his back when he was coming out of the draft, and they did him wrong in the draft video. Big Jeff has been, one of the most beloved players in two-tone blue that's not named Derrick Henry or Kevin Byard in his career, and he's got nothing but pats on the back and praise. So for him not to be able to handle such a little tweet is concerning to me. And, I'll give him a pass because yesterday was an emotional day. First padded practice, coming off a fight on the practice field. Like, emotions were running high. He probably said a lot of things that he didn't mean. But I thought Buck handled it about as well as he could have. He offered Big Jeff to come have a conversation with him. And when a man uses the P word to another man, you don't run away afterwards. You kind of settle down. You got to figure that out. And it looks like they're doing that this morning. But look, I thought it was a horrible look for Big Jeff. But more than that, what a horrible spot it puts Brian Callahan in. I mean, this is a guy that's coming in trying to change the culture, and he has to deal with this in his first padded practice. It's not a football story, right? And it makes him look like he can't control his star players. So that's not fair to Brian Callahan. If there's one reason why I'm upset about this, it's because Brian Callahan comes out the biggest loser in this whole mess.
Yeah, and so I do think Brian Callahan's in a very tough spot. Ryan says it's more layered. Buck took shots at Jeff personally, situation back in high school, tell the whole story. Now, I don't – Buck was uncomfortable with the draft pick, as many people were when that happened. And since then, that's 6 years ago, Ryan. Like, there is Jeff and Buck have had plenty of conversations since then. And I think where this stemmed was – earlier in July, Buck said that he thought Jeffery Simmons was underperforming since the contract. And if you think about it, look, he's battled injuries. I don't think anybody's questioning Jeffery Simmons' toughness on the field, but has he lived up to what he's been paid as a top 6 paid defensive lineman in the NFL? 5.5 sacks last year. Like, you can't go off of that alone because there is more context to that. And then what I think this stemmed from is Buck was unhappy with the Jamal Adams signing. He kind of gave it a type of response, and Jeffery Simmons sees Jamal Adams in a different light and sees what a value it is for Jamal Adams to be on this team with Jeffery Simmons. And Jeff had his tweet right before camp about Nashville media. He's going to bookmark all these things because you guys are hating on this team. And look, it's not the national media's job to carry the torch or to cheerlead at all. It's give opinions. It's honest opinions. I've known that Bucks felt that way about Jamal Adams as a safety since we started talking about free agent safeties. It's nothing new. And so Jeffery Simmons thinks it's disrespectful. I just think it's Buck doing his job. And I think Buck handled himself as well as he possibly could have.
Mm-hmm.
And if you watched primetime last night, then you heard this, and you should go back if you haven't heard this. But Buck talked about how this is not the first time that a player has talked at Buck about something like this, or the first time that any of us have seen this in a locker room. It is time and it is place. And Jeffery Simmons had the wrong time and the wrong place and went about it the opposite way that you should have. And it's not, I definitely think Jeffery Simmons is fair to talk to Buck and to go through and say, I had a problem with this, that, or the other, and to talk that out. But you don't do that on live radio. We don't interrupt their drills and come in and say, hey, can you answer this question about what this tweet that you made? No, that's the comparison to what Jeffery Simmons did. They were live on the radio in a segment with kids around, and Jeffery Simmons could not hold his cool and have a different time and place for that. And that's, that's how that goes. And Bork says, who at A to Z hasn't had an awkward interaction with a Titans player? I mean, anybody that's covered the team for our company has had some type of awkward interaction. Whether it was me, Zach, Buck, obviously, Sam, I don't know if Sam's really had that truly yet. Luke Worsham had it with the head coach. So I had it with the head coach and with some players too, with Mike Vrabel. So that's part of it. If you're doing your job correctly, if people have problems with it to an extent, right? And so I think it's totally fair for this conversation to happen. And according to Paul Kaharski, who has this picture, and Jack, thanks for sending this to me, that they were having the conversation today. So Buck was here as coordinators getting ready to speak, talking with Jeffery Simmons. I'll see Buck here shortly when practice begins and get a recap on how that went, but they're able to talk this out. So, Jack, we've got a lot to get to here still, and I've got about 8 minutes left of availability before practice begins. So let's go ahead and ask the question to our audience today, and that is, what's one word to describe Jeffery Simmons at Titans practice on Tuesday? What's one word to describe Jeffery Simmons at Titans practice on Tuesday? We want all of your opinions in here to fill this through. There's a lot of stuff to get to here. But first, Farm Bureau Health Plans. That's where you should turn for your health, dental, and vision. You can plan on them. fbhp.com/ATOZ. DM me on Twitter. They're open, and I will give you the direct contact email to get better coverage for a lower rate with Farm Bureau Health Plans. They've been serving Tennesseans for over 78 years. fbhp.com/ATOZ. And also the Bone and Joint Institute. Don't fumble on your recovery. boneandjointtn.org. They are the region's destination for comprehensive orthopedic and sports medicine care in Franklin, and with clinics and rehab facilities all across Williamson County and growing. Once again, book an appointment, Bone and Joint TN. Everybody, make sure you like the show. Early audience today, shorter show today, but make sure you hit that like button on Facebook and on YouTube. That goes a long way for us. So, Jack, I'll send you to the chat. What's one word to describe Jeffery Simmons at Titans practice on Tuesday? What does everybody say?
Yeah, Daniel kicks us off on YouTube with sloppy, a word Buck used in his tweet. Stephen King, I like this word, tilted. IR Hoshi says whatever. Lou Man says loser, childish. We've got dog from, I imagine he's referring to Big Jeff. Punk, angry, diva, unhinged. Farley, interesting. Let's see. Crazy, unhinged, disappointing, childish. Darren Lee says normal, asks about Arden Key. That's another problem we're gonna have to discuss when we have more time.
For sure.
Turnt, present, disappointed, heated, fire, hype, petty. Good word from Maven. It happens, Esco says. Emotional, unacceptable, justified, undisciplined, unprofessional, disappointing, funny, warrior, frisky, bothered, kamikaze. What in the world? All the
kamikaze
smoke.
Pilot. He's self-imploding, maybe.
Potentially, you're right. Tone setting. I like that. Emotional, beast mode, passionate, justified, disappointing, beastly. Troy's going to finish us off on Facebook with real. Austin, my one word is temporary. This is a temporary problem. This is a problem that will not exist next week. We will all forget about it. It's only because we don't have a lot to go off of at this point in training camp. And sure, it's a big deal. It made national news. It's on TMZ, for God's sake. But I think that this is a temporary issue. There's bigger things at play for this Titans team in training camp. And you can't worry about one, kind of unhinged day from Jeffery Simmons on the practice field. Like part of Jeffery Simmons, what makes him so good is his fire, right? And if you have to take this with it, then that's all right as long as he's producing on the field. This is a temporary problem. It's not going to be something we talk about next week. And, to be honest, with Big Jeff and Buck Reising already talking about it this morning, that shows a sign of maturity from both of those guys to go ahead and smooth this thing out before, more people have time to talk about it. So I think this is a temporary problem. It's not something Titans fans should be worried about. But at the same time, I wish Brian Callahan wouldn't have to deal with these types of problems. His plate's already full in his first training camp as a head coach. So my one word is temporary.
Temporary. That's interesting. So I want to get to my one word here in a second, but I want to go back to something that was said in the video with Buck and Jeff, because somebody commented, why'd Taylor Lewan catch a stray? And at first I thought about it in that way too. Why is Jeffery Simmons telling Buck, you're a Taylor Lewan guy after this interaction? And I thought, wait, is there some untold beef between Lewan and Jeff? And it turns out I don't think that's the situation at all. And so I was listening to The Zone this morning, and Ramon Foster, who's spent over a decade in an NFL locker room and then a college SEC locker room for 4 years before that, I think really put this well. That Jeffery Simmons said, you're a Taylor Lewan guy, showing disappointment towards Buck. And so to summarize what Ramon's point was, is that Taylor Lewan and Buck have a relationship off of the field. And that was garnered in the locker room and around this team when Lewan was a Titan. And because of that relationship, Buck was more welcomed into the locker room by other players because of his relationship with Taylor Lewan and others. And so I think that's Jeffery Simmons saying, dude, you're a Taylor Lewan guy. You should know how this works better. I'm disappointed in you. That is my translation now after hearing Ramon talk about it, of the you're a Taylor Lewan guy, not the fact that Taylor Lewan's a guy that yaps, talks, and does that for a living now like we all do, right? Because he's really good at it. Taylor Lewan's really good at talking. We know that. And so at first, that's how I took it of, oh, you're a Lewan guy because Lewan talks his ass off just like Buck does. But no, I think it's really the fact that the guard was let down on Buck in that locker room with other players, Jeff included, because of the relationship with Lewan, and Lewan was respected by Jeff and the other members of that locker room. So I did want to clear that up because I thought that was a really, really interesting and well-deserved and well-made point by Ramon this morning. So Jack, what's your kind of thought overall on that one?
Yeah, I get it. And like you were kind of alluding to earlier, these interactions kind of come with the territory of covering the team and being involved in daily operations. You're going to see some of these guys after really good days. You're going to see some of these guys after some of the worst days of their career. And yesterday is probably not a day that Big Jeff was proud of. And that's okay. To have a day like this early in training camp is much better than having it, in the middle of the season where you're starting fights with a teammate. There's a lot of frustrations with this team and how they performed over the last 2 years. Big Jeff's probably feeling that as he's one of the leaders in this locker room, if not the biggest leader in this locker room. And nobody is better at doing their job on this team than Big Jeffery Simmons is. So I'm sure it's taking a toll on him how bad this team's been lately. But I trust Jeffery Simmons to get this thing right. I trust Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon to foster a winning culture in this locker room where you don't have to worry about some of the things that happened yesterday going forward. And it's going to be a learning point for Big Jeff under Brian Callahan. It's going to be a learning point for Brian Callahan dealing with Big Jeff and, training camp altercations like this. So I think it's going to be beneficial for everybody moving forward. Like I said, this is not going to be a problem that's hopefully it's going to linger. I think that this thing happens. He's not Draymond Green. He's not throwing punches at teammates regularly. He's not kicking anybody where they shouldn't be kicked. He's not going on social media and doing all this. But like, I will say, I wish Jeffery Simmons could maybe block out some of the noise, because like I've been saying, there are bigger things at play, and there will be criticisms from teams that perform this way. So, whether that means spending less time on social media, whether that means letting things roll off his back a little bit more, I would like to see him kind of focus on the main thing, keep the main thing, and Big Jeff and the Titans are going to be just fine.
Yeah. So my one word for this is embarrassing. It's embarrassing for Jeffery Simmons in a lot of ways, because Jeffery Simmons could have handled this and could have had the conversation with Buck and it not be seen by a soul. right? And so, like, look, one, I'm glad that Jeff and Buck had their ability to talk this morning, and I'm curious to see what that conversation was like. I'm sure it'll all be fine, because what Buck said last night on primetime is true. They have to have a professional working relationship for it to be working out for both sides. Buck is not an a-hole like a lot of you people say. If you ever meet Buck in real life, he is a pleasant human being, and he likes to listen to people and learn about people and relate to people. He's a very good relator to other people in person, and he just is very strong in his opinions about football. And I think that's where Jeffery Simmons did this in the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong area. And it was embarrassing because, one, TMZ picks it up. It's going national. I heard a national morning radio show talking about it this morning and comparing it to Ozzie Guillen and a radio host in Chicago years ago. And I've seen it all over Fox News, New York Post, websites that don't cover sports that are now covering this. It's an embarrassment to the Titans organization, because this is the face of the franchise who is creating bad PR across the country for doing something in the wrong place in the wrong time. And it's also embarrassing because of who else was around when it went down. Jeffery Simmons is a big person. He just said last week he's 310 pounds. He's 6'4", 310 pounds. Body fat percentage is probably ridiculous for that 310-pound frame. And he was standing around a lot of kids, families, parents, and fans while delivering this. And that's, I think, the most embarrassing part of it too. So I say it's embarrassing overall. That's the one word. I think, Buck handled himself well. I'm Buck's employer. I'm obviously going to stand up for Buck, but I don't dislike Jeffery Simmons. I don't think Jeffery Simmons is a bad leader. I think we can talk about the leadership topic tomorrow when we have more time, because that's something that I think is a learning lesson for Jeffery Simmons in being a leader. And we all have to have those, whether you're a leader or a follower, is what Jeff said last week. So we'll talk about that later on tomorrow. But I do think it was an embarrassing moment for the Titans that was 100% unavoidable. And quote the previous head coach, don't do dumb shit to hurt the football team. And that's what Jeffery Simmons did yesterday, on the field and off the field. You almost punched your 7th overall draft pick without wearing a helmet. That was dumb. And you could have hurt somebody else that makes a lot of money, who's very important to this football team. And then you made national headlines for something that you could have done without cameras, without live radio, behind closed doors, and it would have been totally fine. Totally fine.
Yeah. It's like when a new teacher comes in, you want to see how long that leash is, see how much you can get away with. And I think Jeffery Simmons learned quickly that that's not going to fly. DeMario says, hard to say, Jack, from your position about Jeffery Simmons staying off social media. It is. Look, I'm on social media. I work in the social media space. So it might be the right message, but I'll admit that I'm not the right messenger for this. But all I'm saying is, if this gets Jeff this mad, then it's probably healthiest for him to pay less attention or to take it, a little bit less seriously. Because look, you're playing a sport that's going to have you in the spotlight. You're a leader of a team that hasn't been doing well. If social media is bugging you this much, then maybe it is time to take a step back. But that's not my decision to make for Big Jeff. If Big Jeff, figures out that that's kind of how he wants to approach it, that's on Big Jeff at the end of the day. But I just think that if it's bothering him this much, looking in the mirror and saying, man, maybe this isn't good for me to be this in tune with what's going on. Because we had Mike Herndon on the Tighten Up podcast yesterday, and he's one of the Titans media members that was blocked by Big Jeff for a similar Jamal Adams take. So I just maybe taking a step back and reevaluating things wouldn't be the worst idea. That's where I stand on Big Jeff.
And okay, before I go, Ronnie says, Austin, that wasn't embarrassing at all. How in the F does him getting on a reporter's butt in practice hurt the team? I guarantee you all his teammates love what he did. I'm not saying, again, listen to what I'm saying, Ronnie, and people that are on Ronnie's side of this. Jeffery Simmons has every right to go up to any reporter and to say, I have an issue with what you said or what you tweeted or whatever you did. Just don't do it on live radio airwaves outside at a training camp practice where there are fans and kids directly surrounding the entire tent. Do it somewhere else. And we can't go in the locker room right now. We don't have to go in the locker room right now. The NFL doesn't make that rules until the season gets here. But you can do it off to the side in private. There's a million places in this facility to have that conversation. The one place you don't have that conversation is where it happened. That's my point. I'm not mad at Jeff for being mad at Buck. I think any player should be able to do that. I think it's important to have conversations about these things. I think it should happen more often. It's where it happens. That's the point. It was the worst place for it to happen of all the options.
And
And it was embarrassing because it was embarrassing. TMZ was talking about the Titans and their best player, one of their highest paid players, calling a radio reporter a word that's derogatory that got caught up on live FM radio.
A fighting word if you're not Big Jeff. But Kenneth Frazier says people have the right to speak on negative reporting. He's totally right. Players are allowed to have these opinions. Players are allowed to voice these opinions. But at the same time, I don't think Buck would have tweeted what he tweeted if Big Jeff didn't swing on J.C. Latham without a helmet on, right? So this was kind of created by Big Jeff. And I think it's noble of Big Jeff to walk up to Buck and have that conversation before practice today to smooth it over. Like I said, this is temporary. Those two are going to talk it out. It's going to be fixed, and we're going to move on to actual headlines of substance here, hopefully, moving forward at Titans Training, because there's a lot of news going on out there, and there are bigger conversations that we need to have. But, I'm glad to see that those two are working together to kind of put this in the past.
All right, that'll be it for us today. Make sure you check out Wilson County Hyundai for all of your new car buying needs. WilsonCountyHyundai.com is where to go for that new ride in Lebanon. Again, online, WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Make sure you hit that like button. Please like the show before you go. That goes a long way for us. So hit that like button, and I'll see you guys later on. Buck Reising live again tonight, and stay tuned to training camp updates all over our social media. Catch you later. Appreciate it as always.